edit. Let's get the mic a little closer. Let's edit our guitar command. Cloud bottle load. Jesus. Taking forever. Let's use bruh. Do not tempt the man. Like something that I've done hundreds, if not thousands of times by hand, in 5 minutes. Took 2 hours and still didn't really come out the way I wanted it to. Had to make compromises. Filled with rage. Absolute fury. There we go. Wrong cable. That's why. Do. But what's up, man? Actually, let's go around our strap. Dang, man, nice. I know you've wanted one for a while. Let's back this up a little. Let's get the stream open over here. Let's let the Facebook peeps know we up. That's what a paycheck should be blown on. So that's good. Stream pulled up. I think you need to edit the follower goal because somebody, I guess, regretted their decision. We're missing one. Let's get mod view. Let's see, follower goal. So let's end it and we'll make a new one. Because we also had like a test follow that threw the number off too. Would you get right there? Come on. Bam, there we go. That should be right. Alrighty. I think we can bring our volume up a little more. Alright, let's get warmed up a little. Say hi to everybody. Hi, everybody. Well, howdy there, truck driver. An occasional bus driver. Sorry I couldn't stop in today. I was asleep when you streamed earlier. I get up at about 2:30. But I got up at like 3:54 today for some reason. Hey Pan, what's up? Oh, that's cool. Killer headache, uh-oh. Well, I hope the dulcet tones of my voice will help soothe your aching head. Yeah, bro, you gotta stay hydrated. Haven't you heard? You stay hydrated when it gets hot because you sweat. You gotta stay hydrated, right? Make sure you drink water so you can stay hydrated. Depends on which beer. Some beer is pretty much literally just water. Sounds like I might need to take a hair off the truss rod on this guy. Fretting out a touch down here. Yeah, the PBR is pretty much just water. That's why it's like the least offensive of all the American macro lagers. We'll see, if you're a trucker, you're supposed to be living on Red's vitamin C and cocaine. Or maybe propane. It's a little stiff. I was trying to actually, like, you know, work out and do exercises and lift a little weights last night, what little I can, and now my hands are all like sore. Need to get some weights that have like actual padded handles and stuff. Instead of my yard sale weights with just like metal bars in the middle. Alrighty. let's figure out how to get our chart on screen here and see what it's going to look like. Need to put the chart in the Discord too. Actually, I should put the chart in the Discord first so anybody who wants it can download it. Discord, Discord, Discord. Where are you hiding? There you are. Alright, hopefully opening Discord doesn't crash the stream. Because Discord, of course, has to update itself. Man, these pickups need a little more. Down a little more high end with these guys, with these lace sensors. Alright, Discord's up. Close all that because I don't care. I'm going to go add the chart to the chart channel. Because where else would you find the charts? Alrighty. I can get out of Discord here. The link to the Discord, if you're not in the Discord, is in the chat. And I think also somewhere down underneath the stream. Alright, now let's get the chart open here in the stream. Browse. Where are you at? There you are. Alright, now we gotta do all the finagling so we can see it. And then we gotta mess with the positioning. Wish there was a way to zoom in, to use like the source thing to zoom in on a section of an image, because that would be super, super, super handy, rather than having to like move the whole image around on screen. Does anybody know if that's possible? Because in order to get it big enough for it to actually be visible on screen, it seems like you have to make the entire source window like enormous. But then, you know, you can't get down on just what you want to see at any given moment. There's got to be some way to do it. Got to be some way. I wonder. Let me just pull up the... Yeah, there's like no options. No options when you do like image source at all. Might be a new type of source, or a different type of source somewhere for doing it. I think though, you know, my worry is that like it's probably more important to actually see like what my hands are doing in this case than it is to see the chart covering my hands. I don't know. But we'll get started properly in a couple minutes here. I still need to keep warming up a little bit. I was going to roll this lesson together with the harmonized major scale and how we use the modes essentially to build kind of a chord progression, or to build like the sort of fundamental chord progression of Western music, but I thought I might have to save that for later, especially since I was already having a heck of a time getting the chart the way that I wanted. There we go. Starting to get a little loosened up. Get Rusty to build you one, Pan. Don't need to warm up that much, given that we're just kind of doing something a little less elaborate today. Drifting the hair out of tune. I didn't realize, I watched Rusty stream that the other night. I didn't realize that there were like, rules and stuff, or skill points and, like objectives. Thought it was just, go drive around. Try not to wreck. What were you playing, like campaign or story mode? Bus Simulator has story mode. It does have lore, I guess, for its characters, which is pretty amusing for its drivers. All right. So before we dive in to the modes themselves, does anybody out there have any particular questions about some of the stuff we've done before, like the intervals? Because you need to know the intervals, or at least it'll be helpful if you remember the intervals when we're going through these. They're kind of an important component of it. Or just any general questions before I start blabbing. Or if you recall back to the second music theory stream, maybe, we talked about scalar construction and how to break a scale down in terms of its intervals. It's a big part of what we're doing tonight and what we're going to be talking about tonight. Knuckles are all crankly. Oh, Rusty's good. So, going back to what we did a few Music Theory Mondays ago, what I was talking about was when we took, like, say, the major scale, and we learned its formula of whole steps and half steps, and then we broke those down into the intervals that are created by them to understand why the major scale sounds the way that it sounds. So, the major scale formula was root, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So 2 wholes and a half followed by 3 wholes and a half. You can play that, all on one string or any fingering you want. That doesn't really matter in this particular case. But what does matter is that that formula creates an interval sequence of a perfect first, i.e. the root, 0 half steps movement. A whole step gives us a major second. Another whole step gives us a major third. Half step gives us a perfect fourth. Whole step gives us a perfect fifth. Whole step gives us a major sixth. Another whole step gives us a major seventh. And then the last half step gives us a perfect eighth, or an octave. And then we could start over from there if we wanted to keep going up, or moving across the fingerboard in different ways. Running out of frets. Fingers don't fit up here terribly well. There we go. So that's a standalone scale, essentially. We're treating that like one little container, the major scale as a container for that set of intervals. Once we start kind of learning what those intervals sound like, the kind of effects that are created. Hey, Ride, what's up? Yeah, thanks. This is a really cool Strat that I got it at Atlanta Discount Music, maybe 3 years ago. Pretty rare one too. And somebody brought in a giant collection of Strats to the store to consign. This was right after the Purple House, right after they moved to the White House, and before they painted the shutters purple to remind people of the old Purple House. But someone had brought in a giant collection of Strats, and this one was just kind of buried in it. And these are actually really collectible and really sought after, and they had it priced more like a more common model. So I snagged it because I've always wanted one. I also like that this one, it's a color called Mystic Black, but you can kind of see when the light catches it, there's almost like a little blue-green sparkle to it. And if you have it right up under really bright lights, then you get like a real pop, like a really kind of sparkly pop, which is cool. But lots of cool features on this one. The roller nut, which has little ball bearings in it instead of like a bone or plastic nut, so the string just flows smoothly back and through when you use the vibrato or when you bend. Ebony fingerboard, the lace sensor setup with the splittable lace sensor red dually in the bridge, where you can choose any coil or both, so you can go from 2 different single coil sounds or a humbucker sound. The TBX tone control that lets you like use it as a regular tone control or boost the mids. The Floyd Rose 2 trim here. It's kind of like a compact version of a Floyd. Lots of really nice features. This was the highest end of the non-custom shop stuff at the time that it was made. But, oh hey Maramero, what's up? Yeah, and notice how he used the guitar command to find out more details about the guitar. There's also an amp command, which I think should be accurate. I don't recall changing anything from last time. Once I figure out how to if I can get to where I can mic the amp without bleeding too much into the vocal mic, if I can get that set up, we can change amps a lot more. We start using some of the big amps and more unusual amps. The setup I'm using now is mostly because it's very kind of compact and controllable. String gauge is pretty much always 9s, man. Oh, I don't have the compressor in anymore. Dang. I forgot I put the compressor pedal on it last time. We're just running straight in today. Let's update that. How nerdy do you guys want to get? Because I can make commands for all this crap. Picks are pretty much always the same too, though. Picks are basically always the Dunlop Ultex Jazz 3. Every now and then I'll use like a Petrucci or something else, but because Alec gave me a Petrucci a while ago, and it's pretty good. It's a little pointier than the Jazz 3, which has its pros and cons. Let's see. Add command. Where? There it is. No, that's not where it goes. Dunlop Ultex Jazz 3. There, now you got to pick command. Try it. Let's make sure it works. Bam. String command wouldn't be bad too, because I usually use the same strings on everything, but that could get difficult. That could get crazy. Pick guard screws. You want me to do pick guard screw command? Oh, geez. Just do an ASL command. No, this one's got the normal number of screws. Poor Bert. For real though, I was incredibly annoyed when that guy put that extra screw in that guitar originally. Then I kind of grew to like it because it made it unique. Just sort of stopped caring. But still, when you think about it, like, man, that was a dense thing to do. Heck yeah, man. That's awesome. Be sure to let us know. Jump in the Discord and let us know when it gets there. That way we can say, sweet, bro. Yeah, Pan recently went through the experience of getting his first dual locking bridge set up. All right, let's see. I mean, do we need another channel just for that? I mean, it seems like that could be something you could put in the main channel, but I guess we could. Just like a post your gear channel. Yeah, I don't have any Discord mods. I guess I should make some. You're being noisy. Quit that. Yeah, Ibanez just makes great stuff in general. Like, it's pretty hard to go wrong. Yeah. You know, Petrucci used to be an Ibanez endorser. Dang it. Drop my pick. What? There it is. Had a signature model. It had this cool kind of Picasso, they called the Picasso finish on it, which was sort of like cubist faces and designs. And they're extremely expensive. They very, 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 very rarely turn up. Ba, ba, ba. Yeah, actually, I own a Warmoth bass, and I used to own a Warmoth Strat, and then had a couple other pass through my hands. As a general rule, it's pretty good quality stuff. A lot of times, the thing with Warmoth is buy it used if you can, because it's got usually pretty poor resale value, because, you know, people want their own custom parts rather than somebody else's custom parts. So in many cases, you can find Warmoth parts, you know, necks and bodies, or even in some cases whole guitars, like dirt cheap compared to the cost of the parts. And then you can do whatever you want with them. You know, unless you know you want something really, 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 really specific in terms of like color and wood and everything. In fact, give me just a sec. I'll go grab the bass and show it to you guys real quick. It's on a stand over here. You can see the quilt maple top over ash body with Duncan bass lines, the Pal Faro fingerboard with ebony gecko inlay, flame maple neck, 5-piece flame maple neck with, I believe these look like Wingay stringers. It's a pretty monstrous bass. It has an incredible B string too, which you can't hear because it's not plugged in, but you know, the quality is really outstanding. I think this bass, I traded one of my friends for it, for another bass that I had, but I was there when he got it. It showed up at the local music go round down in Duluth for like $285, something like that. This bass new, whoever built this bass, it would have cost him probably about $1,400 or $1,500 in parts. Because the geckos are, as a rule, pre-assembled, you know, pre-fretted and everything by Warmoth. And they get pretty darn expensive. But, you know, it came into the store, and the store just like, yeah, it's a Warmoth. We don't really know anything about it. They're just like a parts maker, right? So they probably gave whoever traded it in like, you know, $150 for it. Man, we need to do a bass stream soon. I haven't played bass really in a while. Maybe we'll do Friday Night Funk and we'll just play bass. Well, if we do Motown Monday, I got to go get my P bass with flat wounds on it. I've been trying to think of more themes so we can mix stuff up more though. I don't know. You guys let me know though. Think about it. You guys talk about it amongst yourselves, or think about it and think if there are other themes. Do you think I should vary it more? Do you think doing like every other thing? Basically, we're doing something like twice a month at the moment, or should there be like some days that are more common, or some days that are only like once a month or something like that? Free for All Friday seems pretty popular, relatively speaking. Weeb Wednesday and Metal Monday both do pretty well too. This, I think, is the most people that have ever showed up for the music theory stream because it scares people. And then Washed Out Wednesday is just me playing with pedals, which I immensely enjoy. But I'm certainly open to mixing things up, you know. Like we could do a folk music Friday or something where we do acoustic stuff. Because we hardly ever play acoustic on here. Or, I mean, it doesn't have to be alliterative. That's just, you know, a fun gimmick. We can do any particular thing on any given day. But I would like to schedule it, you know, so like it's going to be the second Wednesday or the, you know, third Friday or whatever consistently. Yeah. I also still think doing like an 80s night or 90s night or different stuff like that would be fun too. All right. So anyways, while you all give that consideration, by 90s night I meant 1890s. Do all early vaudeville and ragtime. All right. 50s Friday. Yeah, I mean, like, we can do that kind of thing, you know, maybe once a month or something like that. Do a decade day. Or maybe even make it a special stream, like a Saturday or a Sunday or something. You know, I was also thinking have a stream, you know, so this stream's dedicated more to the theory side of things. We could even do like a bi-weekly or even like maybe just once a month, depends. A stream where we just focus on technique, you know, a specific technique like our picking hand, you know, different things. Just focus on arpeggios, just focus on scale patterns, just focus on, you know, whatever. Because I can make tons of different charts for different technical stuff. Well, once we get the multicam setup going, then doing the setup video will be a real possibility. Because with the laptop, it's basically not a thing. We can't do it. There's no way you can actually see what's going on. But once we get the extra camera and then like the secondary camera, then, you know, I can have like an overhead cam, and then I can have like a string level or guitar level cam where you can actually see what's happening. you know, so I don't want to do those until like we can actually make the content decent. All right. So we were talking, we had the major scale, the root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half in terms of its whole step, half step formula. Then perfect first, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, octave, or perfect eighth for the interval formula. If we want to branch out into the modes, first we need to know what the modes are. And this seems to be a source of perennial confusion for students and people who come in, especially people who can play some. You know, they might know a few scales, but they say, I keep hearing people talking about how you need to know your modes, but I don't really understand what modes are. It's because modes have something of a confusing history. You know, if you go way back to when the term really first started being used commonly, it's predominantly used in the context of like Gregorian chant in that era. Yes, guitar a la mode. I don't know which would hurt my teeth more, the ice cream or the guitar. But it tended to refer to kind of like a standalone scale which evoked a particular sense. We didn't really, or they didn't really think of scales in the context of like a 12-tone equal temperament system like we use. They tended to think of them in very sort of relative terms. And if you read the old literature, it's all over the place. You know, if you read old music theory books, you'll see people using like the same name for a different mode or a different scale, or arguing over tiny little changes in between them, all kinds of stuff like that. But there wasn't anything really concrete. But after we started using the 12-tone equal temperament scale, roughly around the Baroque eras, when that started to become standardized and common, it's certainly variations of equal temperament type things certainly existed beforehand, but the 12-tone equal temperament thing didn't become common until the Baroque era and the common practice period, so named because it became common practice. But the modes started to kind of coalesce into more concrete ideas. The way that it's most practical to look at modes today, though, is to look at them like a parent scale giving birth or deriving or producing a subset of scales out of that parent scale's tones. So the parent scale that we're using is the major scale. It's the most common and the most important scale in Western music. And we have, again, that formula, root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. All we have to do to find the modes that come from the major scale, which are known as the major modes, even though some of them are minor, there are actually other modes that come from non-major scales, is simply move our starting point in that formula. So if we start off with root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, and we get, in the case of notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, to find the next mode, all we do is start on the D. So we move our root from C up to D. We keep all the other notes the same. We get D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. When we look at that in terms of its formula, then, that gives us root, whole, half, whole, 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 half, whole. And we can hear right off the bat that that sounds minor. So out of that major scale, we got a minor scale. And we'll see other minor scales and even a half diminished scale and other major type scales as we go through each one of those 7 scale tones of the major scale. Now the major scale's modal name, let's get the chart back up on screen. And again, the chart is in the chart section of the Discord. The major scale is known as the Ionian mode. So if you hear somebody talking about an Ionian sound, they're talking about the major scale. They're talking about that container of intervals. Perfect first, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, then octave or perfect eighth. When we step up to that second tone, and the way that I've written them on the chart is essentially staying in the same position and the same fingering, and then gradually making our way all the way up to the octave, rather than shifting into new positions. So if we started with our middle finger, the second one will start with our pinky, like that, right? The second one is called the Dorian mode. And down at the bottom of the chart, because I got mad at MS Paint, like recentering all of my stuff without me telling it to, I've given a legend that has the formulas and the interval collections for each one of those modes, so you can see how those change and how they relate to each other in different ways. But when we're doing that Dorian, since the formula becomes root, whole, half, whole, 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 half, whole, the intervals become perfect first, major second, minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, minor seventh, perfect eighth. So we can hear some big changes compared to the major scale. The major scale had all major and perfect intervals, but the Dorian, which comes right out of the major scale, has a lowered third. It has a minor third, which gives us a minor sound right off the bat. Then it has a minor seventh. Waffle House. Oh, Lord. Right. So we have a minor third. We still have a major second. We have a minor third. Perfect fourth. Perfect fifth. Major sixth. Minor seventh. Then our octave. So that means we get this whole tone jump up from here. Yeah, that wee bab, Alec. What that translates to, though, is because we have that different interval set, we get a different overall sound to it, and we're going to get a different type of chord from it as well as we start to build chords out of those particular modes, which is what the harmonized major scale is. We may talk about that some at the end when we get through all of them, even though I don't have a chart prepared for it yet. But once we get through each one of these modes, each one of the 7 modes of the major scale of the Ionian, coming from the Ionian, we want to look at each one and its intervals and say, okay, well, this differs from the others in this way, because they're all going to have something unique about them, something that really distinguishes them and creates their own kind of unique sound. So that was Dorian, starting on the second tone. In this case, it would start on D because I used C for the Ionian. So if we go up then to the third mode, that would be starting on the third tone of the C Ionian, or the second tone of the D Dorian, if you want to look at it that way. And that would give us, no, not that, don't move that. Stop it. Stop it. Streamlabs is being stupid. There we go. Give me the chart. All right, there we go. That would give us E Phrygian. So where we went C, D, E, we're now using E as our root. But we're still following the tones of the C major scale. So that's going to give us E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, formula-wise, root, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. So let's turn this up a hair. When we then look at the intervals that creates, we start off with a perfect first, because the first is always a perfect first, except for the weird cases where we get an augmented first, but that's for later. Then we get a half step, which gives us a minor second. So when we talked about our intervals, we talked about the degrees of dissonance, consonance, and dissonance that they have. The minor second is just about as dissonant as it gets. So right off the bat, this mode, Phrygian, starts off with a really tense and dark and dissonant sound. Then up to a minor third. There's the perfect fourth, which doesn't care if it's major or minor. Perfect fifth, doesn't care if the scale's major or minor. Minor sixth, another very tense one. Minor seventh, and then perfect eighth. Because it contains so many minor intervals, we tend to think of it as being very tense and dark sounding, closely associated with flamenco music. Because the Moorish music that flamenco music partially descended from, and the Arabic music that the Moorish music descended from, uses some very closely related types of scalar sounds in their maqams, which are kind of like fragmentary microtonal scales that they implement. So that one has a really distinctive sound, the Phrygian mode. Yeah, definitely. Keep in mind that the guitar has an immense Middle Eastern influence in general. You know, the vihuela and some of the instruments that the guitar descended from were very heavily influenced by the oud and the impact of Moors. You know, this type of guitar that we play sitting upright like this is called a Spanish guitar in general, as in contrast to like a Hawaiian guitar, which became popular in the late 1800s, early 1900s, which is played in the lap. The S in like ES, as in like a Gibson, you know, ES1, ES335 or 135 or 175 actually stands for Spanish, as in like Electro Spanish. They also made EHs, which were Electro Hawaiians, which were lap steels mostly. Normally when you say Spanish guitar, people think of a classical guitar, but this style of guitar, just like as a meta style that's played upright, is actually a Spanish guitar, which itself has an enormous Moorish influence. So that's the Phrygian mode. That's the third mode of the major scale. Yeah, I actually have a Hawaiian guitar in the bag behind me on the couch. Oh. With a Hawaiian koa back inside, which is pretty cool. It's from like 1918 as well, which is really neat. Got it at a flea market. Right, so we have Ionian, the major scale. Root, whole, half, whole, half. We have Dorian, starting on the second tone of the major scale. Root, whole, half, whole, half, whole. We have Phrygian, starting on the third tone of the major scale. Root, half, whole, half, whole. On the fourth tone, we have Lydian, which is one of my favorite ones, and criminally underused in rock music. Super common in jazz and classical, but because of one particular tone it contains, it tends to put a lot of rock players off for some reason. The Lydian, starting on that fourth tone, is going to go root, whole, half, whole, half. In this case, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. And you'll notice that from a technical perspective, I'm playing something called a squeeze shift when I move to the B string. I squeeze my index finger up a fret, so I can use ring finger and pinky appropriately on the E and F notes. That would be a tip from Technique Tuesdays. If that ever becomes a thing. Alright, so that Lydian, when we look at its intervals, starts off the same way as the Ionian. We have root, whole, whole, so that means we're going to get perfect first, major second, major third. But then we have a third whole step, which means we have 6 half steps total from the root. In this case, it's serving as the 4th interval of the scale, so we have to call it an augmented 4th. So we have root, major second, major third, augmented 4th. And that's a pretty strong dissonance. But then we resolve it immediately with a perfect 5th, major 6th, major 7th octave. So that's almost identical to the major scale, except for the 4th being lifted or raised up a half step to the augmented 4th. And that gives us a really unique kind of sound, because we start off, we can make major arpeggios with it, but the minute we go and grab that 4th, we get this interesting kind of dissonance. It almost has a playful feel in the context of everything else being major. We hear that sort of sound, that Lydian sound, in things like the Jetsons, which was meant to make it sound sort of futuristic. If we just did that with, say, like the major scale, you get, which doesn't sound anywhere near as kind of spacey or dreamy as. If we do that with the perfect 4th, it sounds almost more like Copland. It sounds more Western. Which the Jetsons theme was stolen for The Simpsons as well. When it gives us this almost whole tony kind of augmented sort of sound too. When we build that into chords, we get these nice sharp 11 chords as well, which are very dreamy and colorful. You know, if we try to play that same chord with a perfect 4th, it's awful fingering, but it breaks tertian harmony and actually becomes more dissonant sounding and less kind of pleasantly colorful in comparison. So that's the Lydian mode. The 4th mode, root, whole, 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 half, whole, whole, half. Alright, moving up to the 5th mode, starting on the 5th tone of the major scale. In this case, G, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We get what's called the Mixolydian mode. We can hear it's kind of major sounding as well. If we look at its formula, it's going to start off the same way. Root, whole, whole. So there's that major second, major third again. Half, perfect 4th. Whole, perfect 5th. Whole, major 6th. So far it's identical to the major scale. But when we get to that 7th tone, instead of being a whole, it's a half. So root, whole, whole, half, whole. Interval-wise, it's identical to the major scale. Perfect 1st, major 2nd, major 3rd, or perfect 4th, perfect 5th, major 6th, until we get to the 7th, minor 7th, and then the perfect 8th, or the octave. And the addition of that minor 7th adds a little bit of funkiness to the otherwise very upbeat and majory sound. We hear it in Celtic music, we hear it, you know, all over the place, really. If you've ever heard like a chord progression that goes like, which is like, you know, at least 70% of classic rock music, that's a Mixolydian type progression. Or because it gives us sort of the consonants of the major, but it then gives us that extra little bit of kick or color coming in from that minor seventh that we don't get from the major scale. Grateful Dead like that scale a lot too. Jam bands are way into it. They'll just kind of noodle on the Mixolydian mode forever and ever and ever and ever, because it also overlaps very nicely with the pentatonics and blues scales. So it's really easy to kind of milk and get some fun colors. Genre, no. Meta genre, yes. If you're gonna play it like the Grateful Dead too, you got to play like straight eighth notes. You know, you got to just. And then throw in some blues scale. No, come on. You can't listen to American Beauty or Working Man's Dead and tell me those aren't good albums. Now, I have very little interest in listening to them live because, yeah, it's pretty rough. It kind of gets monotonous, and in some cases just like a little too loose. But some of their albums are actually really strong as standalone albums with, you know, complete and focused songs on them instead of, you know, just endless rambles. See, I don't even like Cherry Garcia. That's nowhere close to my favorite Ben and Jerry's flavor. I don't like candied cherries in general. Plus vanilla ice cream. Who wants vanilla ice cream? It's supposed to be cherry flavored, but it's just vanilla ice cream. It has cherries in it. It doesn't taste like cherries at all. So far we have Ionian, the major scale. We have Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian. That gets us to the sixth tone, which in this case is going to be this A note. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Root, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. This is the Aeolian mode. The Aeolian mode is the natural minor scale, or just the minor scale. When someone talks about playing in a minor key, they're talking about basing its notes off of the Aeolian mode. Though when we build a chord progression from it, we do have to steal a note from the harmonic minor, but we'll come to that at some point in the future. We look at our intervals. Yeah, that's Billy Sheehan's least favorite mode because he's convinced it's mayonnaise. All right, so we're starting with that perfect first, and then we have a major second, and we have minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, minor sixth, minor seventh, perfect eighth. Now, you may be asking yourself, why is it that the minor scale, or the Aeolian mode, is the minor scale when it has a major second? Because if we went back to the Phrygian mode, that one had minor everything. That had a minor second, and a minor third, and a minor seventh. And the issue has to do with the way those chord progressions are constructed and the way that harmony was kind of perceived. The minor second produced a sequence of chords that didn't create strong enough resolutions. It didn't give us a very distinctly clear 2-5 type harmony or authentic cadence kind of feel in comparison, because it made our 5 chord essentially the 7 chord, which is not what we want. You know, if we're playing in the Phrygian mode and we play a 2-5-1, then we get, which doesn't really sound like a strong or complete resolution at all. It doesn't sound like an authentic cadence in the slightest. But if we play, say, a 2-5-1 using Aeolian as our starting point, we get, which is a very clean and closed sounding cadence. Compared to what would be actually really that fingering. So boom. That can make a cool substitution in a minor key, throwing in, say, like a Phrygian cadence back to the 1. But in compositional terms, the people who were writing music at that time didn't feel like it was strong enough. They wanted this really clear 5-1 type change, and we don't get that at all in Phrygian. So the Aeolian mode with that major second actually creates a stronger resolution, a stronger 5-1 type resolution. So there's the Aeolian: root, major second, minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, minor sixth, minor seventh, perfect eighth. Then we get to the fun one, probably the least used one in popular music. Then you get the Locrian mode for the 7th, and that's going to start on the B. In the case of C, a C Ionian. We're going to get root, half, or let's do the notes first. B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And we can hear that one's very, very tense and very dark and dissonant. It has some similar effects to the Phrygian at first because we start off with that half step, root, half, whole, half, whole. But then it starts to mix things up as we get towards the middle of the mode. So, perfect first, minor second, minor third, perfect fourth, diminished fifth. That's the big key. That's sort of the key to this one. Minor sixth, minor seventh, perfect eighth. And the effect of that diminished fifth is very similar in some ways to the effect of the augmented fourth in the Lydian because they're inharmonically equivalent. An augmented fourth and a diminished fifth are the same interval relationship, but in this case they have different relationships to the root. In the Lydian mode, it was the fourth tone of the scale, so it had to be called an augmented fourth. In this case, it's acting as the fifth tone, so it has to be called a diminished fifth. We can still hear that kind of tension, that dissonance coming from them. And then from that, we get an interesting effect as well because we have an extended sequence of wholes, root or whole, note, in this case the diminished fifth, whole. So we get that kind of whole tone sort of effect, or pseudo-Lydian effect, coming off the diminished fifth of the Locrian, because that's actually where the Lydian mode would begin. That's the F again. So we start off and we get a Phrygian sound. Then we get this cool Lydian sound coming up, and that's looking at it in terms of its tetrachords, essentially like the 2 4-note halves of the scale, halves of the scale. And because this has all these minor intervals, minor third, minor sixth, minor seventh, this is going to produce a minor type chord, but then with a diminished fifth. So when we make a triad out of it, we get a diminished triad, meaning our seventh chord from the Locrian mode is going to be a diminished type chord or triad. When we add the seventh, that becomes something a little bit different, but we'll talk about that later. So we have Ionian, the major scale, root, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, perfect eighth. Dorian, the second major mode, root, major second, minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, minor seventh, octave. Phrygian, root, minor second, minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, minor sixth, minor seventh, octave, perfect eighth. Lydian, the fourth mode, root, major second, major third, augmented fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, octave. Mixolydian, the fifth mode, root, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, minor seventh, octave. Aeolian, also known as the minor scale, root, major second, the sixth mode, root, major second, minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, minor sixth, minor seventh, octave. And then Locrian, the seventh mode, root, minor second, minor third, perfect fourth, diminished fifth, minor sixth, minor seventh, octave. And then from there we would be back to Ionian. If we went up to that next half step, root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, there's the Ionian mode again. Root, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, octave. And it would just repeat indefinitely from there. Dorian again, and there we go. Play it all on the same string. I don't usually finger it that way. Those are the major modes. So when someone talks about the modes, they're usually referring to that particular set of 7 modes coming out of the major scale, as are all listed on the chart. From there, once you have essentially those formulae, I'm going to bring the chart back up, those formulae memorized, and you've gotten to where you can play them and kind of see how they come out of each other. Let's blow this section down here up a little bit, if we can. There we go, and just cover the whole screen with it for a second. We have to start thinking about what makes them different and how do we use them. Now, we can have what's called playing the changes, which is where once we learn the chords that come from those, i.e. the harmonized major scale, your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Roman numerals that you may have seen before or heard me talk about, if I say like a 2, 5, 1, something like that, where you play the mode that corresponds to the chord relative to the position in the major chord progression. But the more useful kind of way to approach them is subbing them in for each other, getting interesting, like learning which one has which particular kind of characteristic and quality, and learning when that might be an interesting place to use it. When we look at these and look at the intervals that they contain, what we want to do is we want to start breaking them down into major groups and minor groups. Right? We have 3 that roughly fall, and calling them purely major or minor is not exactly accurate, but in essence, when we look at the triads that they produce and stuff, we can call them major or minor. And then we have the one outlier being the Locrian, which is its own little half diminished kind of sound, though in some cases we can kind of swap it into minor too, depending on what's going on. But if we take that major scale as kind of the benchmark, the Ionian as the benchmark, we see that it has a major third, a perfect fifth, producing a major triad. Then if we went from there, we would have a major seventh as well, if we went all the way up to the 7. When we look through the other modes, we want to look for ones that have those particular features or some combination of those features. It may not have all of them because they're all unique, but some combination of those features in common with the major scale. So if we look right away at the Dorian, root, whole, half, now we start off with a minor third. That's not a good start. That's not going to be probably major sounding at all because, well, you know, it's a minor third, and the third's the most important interval, arguably. But perfect fourth, perfect fifth are the same, but they don't matter because they're perfect. Major sixth is the same, but the sixth is not a particularly strong interval. The seventh is minor. That's different. The seventh's also a very strong and important interval. That's different. So we can safely say, just kind of purely reasoning by the interval types, that the Dorian is not a major type scale. And we can hear it too, obviously, if you learn to hear major and minor anyway. We look at Phrygian. Basically everything in Phrygian is minor, so it's again safe to say that it's not major type. We look at Lydian, however, and we have root, whole, root, major second, major third. So that starts off the same way, and it has a major third, which is good. The augmented fourth is different. Perfect fifth is the same. Major sixth and major seventh are the same. So the only thing that's different from Ionian to Lydian is the fact that the fourth is augmented. So it's safe to lump then, or safe to move that Lydian into a major type mode grouping. Then we look at Mixolydian. Start off with that major third again. Major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth. Those are all the same. Major sixth is the same. Minor seventh is different. And that's important once we start building seventh chords out of it. But when we look at the triad and the overall tonality of the scale, we hear an essentially like a basically major sound coming out of that. Aeolian is the minor scale, so again, pretty safe to assume that it's not going to be major type. And then Locrian is super dissonant, super minor, and partially diminished. So it's again safe to say it's not major. So our major types are the Ionian, the Lydian, and the Mixolydian. Our minor types are the Dorian, the Phrygian, and the Aeolian. Then Locrian, again, is kind of in its own little world, has its own special uses. So if we run into, you know, just like a chord vamp where someone's playing, you know, just a C chord. And we're trying to think of things to play on top of that. We can either say like, okay, we can use the pentatonics. Super exciting, right? You know, or the major blues scale. This is when I need a looper. A looper would be super helpful here. Or we can say, well, okay, this is just a major triad. It's got, you know, if we're playing just a C major chord like this, we've got a root, we've got a major third, we've got a perfect fifth. Which of those modes have roots? Well, they all have roots. Major thirds and perfect fifths. Ionian, Lydian, and Mixolydian. So if someone's jamming along, we could throw in Ionian phrases. I'm just sticking in this one little box for right now just to kind of keep it simple. I could try Lydian. And again, that tension from the Lydian, from that augmented fourth, is going to really kind of stick out. So we usually only want to use it if we want to draw attention to that line, if we really want to create a little bit of tension to resolve coming off of that augmented fourth. And it's usually going to resolve upwards to a perfect fifth or downwards to the major third. If you linger on it, it's going to really, really, really stick out and clash, especially since it's only a half step below the perfect fifth. So you get this minor second effect. between the augmented fourth and the perfect fifth. Again, if you want to make something really tense sounding, it's a good way to do it. All right. Or we can use the Mixolydian. And in a rock context, that Mixolydian is going to be super common, because rock is predominantly derived from blues music, and blues music tends to use these what are called dominant seventh chords, even though it's not a strictly correct name for them, or just seventh chords. Those have major thirds and minor sevenths, just like the Mixolydian mode does. So it's a sound we're very used to hearing. It's a little tougher sounding than the major scale is. The major scale almost sounds a little flowery in comparison to the Mixolydian. We do that same phrase with the major scale. So you have those choices, those three choices right off the bat, and then you can weave that in with your pentatonics, your blues scales, your other things like that. The pentatonic is really just kind of like a reduction of those major type scales anyway, omitting the fourth and the seventh. So those are our three major types: Ionian, Lydian, and Mixolydian. I'm sure I played those slowly enough that you can hear every tone clearly. Now, our three minor types then become interchangeable to a degree as well. If we have a C minor chord, which has root minor third, perfect fifth, those three modes with those three intervals were the Dorian, the Phrygian, and the Aeolian. We're going to use the Aeolian as the default because it's the minor scale. So if we have something going... It's a very sad, fairly sad kind of, fairly dark kind of sound. If we want to make that a little more playful, a little more lively, we can substitute the Dorian mode for that. The Dorian mode is identical, except instead of a minor sixth, it had a major sixth. So now we have that major sixth gives us that little bit of flair, a little bit of spice to that minor sound. So instead of sounding all kind of dour and Aeolian, it's somewhat brighter sounding. If you read, in particular, old music theory textbooks specifically, they tend to categorize the modes in terms of brightness as well, relative brightness. So the Ionian would be very bright. The Lydian would be even brighter because it has that extra wide fourth in it, so on and so forth. It's a kind of a useful way to think about things, but you really have to develop sort of your own language in your head for thinking about them. and for recognizing them, and when you might want to use their sound. So Dorian, Aeolian, Phrygian is going to be extremely dark sounding because it's pulling that second down to a minor second. It's going to create a lot of tension. So Phrygian in particular, you have to be fairly careful when you use it if you're just kind of improvising, because a lot of cases, if the chords, if we don't have a chord a half step above the root, that Phrygian tone is going to stick out when the chord changes. Like say if the chord changes up to a 2 chord, say from a C minor to a D minor 7 flat 5, or just a regular D minor. In that case, the minor second would be a D flat, and it's going to really, really, really kind of yell at you. But if you have a progression that's just doing, you know, that's basically all along the Watchtower, Burning for You, a million other rock songs, you can get away with Phrygian, especially in faster lines where we're not hearing that tone or not lingering on that tone anywhere near as much. Dorian, on the other hand, can be subbed in almost any place where the natural minor can, and it'll still work fine. Because that major 6 is not as strong a tone as the minor second is. Versus minor second is way more intense. And then, of course, your minor pentatonics and minor blues fit in the same spaces, too. The Locrian, you pretty much just want to use the Locrian when we run into diminished chords and half diminished chords, more specifically, minor 7 flat 5 chords. If we swap it into a minor place, like on top of a minor chord, it's really going to stick out. Now, if you're playing fusion or you're playing something more jazzy, then go for it, knock yourself out. Or if you just want that tension, of course, knock yourself out, go for it. But it's going to be dissonant in comparison. It does make a good transition into like the minor blues scale, because the minor blues scale has both that perfect fourth and diminished fifth in it. You know, so if you're kind of jamming in the blues scale, you can kind of swap it in and do little slick things with it. In context. But other than that, it's a little more narrow in terms of how we can use it. But kind of thinking about them in that way, thinking about them in those groups. The major ones, the major scale, Ionian. We have Lydian, which is the same as the major scale but with a sharp 4. We have Mixolydian, which is the same as the major scale but with a flat 7, a minor 7th. Then the minor group, the Aeolian. Dorian, which is Aeolian with a sharp 6. Phrygian, which is Aeolian with a flat 2. And then Locrian, which is Phrygian with a flat 5 on its own out there. It can help you kind of get your head around like, okay, this is how this one is different from another. This is the way we can use it. This is the place or places I can use it. You know, if I'm playing along with a song or a backing track or just trying to write a melody even, you know, I can throw in little variations here and there just by tweaking one mode into another mode. So, those are the modes of the major scale. Everybody got them all? Got them all memorized? Don't forget the chart is in the Discord. If you would like the chart that we use, that I wrote out for all of this. It shows them in the key of C and then shows their formulas. It's the chart that I had pulled up a moment ago, which has both tab notation and then a list at the bottom. It is in the charts channel, appropriately. All right, questions about those? Anything about that related to those modes? I know somebody's got them, but you got to speak up. Stuff over here. All right, let's talk. Let me drink some water here. All right. If we don't have any specific questions about that, let's, I guess, open up the stream. A little more discussion oriented. Let's edit our title. Bum, bum. Alrighty. So I guess now that we're done with that, I'm gonna do whatever. Does anybody have any general theory or guitar or music related questions that they want to discuss or talk about? Yeah, absolutely. You know, make a list even, you know, write them down so you can ask. You know, if you go back to the old charts, you download the interval chart, stuff like that. then that kind of lays a lot of the groundwork, though, for all the other things. And if you can really understand that stuff, it tends to make a lot of the future questions kind of easier to resolve or easier to visualize. You know, that's something that I can't harp on enough, is really, 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 really try to learn your intervals. Because the scales are made from them, the chords are made from them, everything's made from them, basically. Trying to see if I can get these repeats or this oscillation to just ride right under the surface. So, like, say, something I do a lot on when we do Washed Out Wednesday, which is this Wednesday actually, when I'm doing these sort of ambient compositions and things, is I tend to be thinking in a mode rather than thinking in a chord progression per se. I tend to be thinking like I want to create or evoke the sound or feel of a given mode, and then I'll create a platform for it. So in this case, I'm using the Aeolian mode. Then I might say, let's have a little Dorian. Yeah, no, it's absolutely important, absolutely important to know what intervals are being produced by the tone, tone, semitone, by the whole steps and half steps. Because every scale formula, every tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, or whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, right, is producing a set of a sequence of intervals relative to that root. That is why that scale sounds the way that it sounds. That is why a given chord is going to be produced from that scale. So you've got to really learn that, and really learn to hear that. Because each scale in isolation, kind of standalone, is like a box or a container. A box or a container for a set of intervals. Because learning the whole step, half step formula, the tone, tone, semitone, only tells you how to find it, how to find the fingering from a given root, or find a note from a given root, but it doesn't tell you the interval itself until you actually go like, okay, wait a minute. So tone, whole step, major second. Another tone, another whole step, okay, major third, semitone, all right, perfect fourth. That starts to tell me things about that scale, meaningful things about that scale, not just how to find a fingering for it. Right. So that's why down at the bottom of the chart, I listed the modes, listed the formula of tones and semitones, and then listed the intervals that were produced by those tones and semitones. So you definitely want to get those memorized. So that's also how you make these transformations, how you change from, say, playing Aeolian that I'm playing right now to Dorian. Because I'm going, well, okay, the difference between Aeolian and Dorian is the fact that Aeolian has a minor sixth, Dorian has a major sixth. Otherwise, they're the same. So if I'm playing Aeolian, I can suddenly transition to that major sixth and get a Dorian sound. Yeah, take your time. You know, it takes everybody, it takes a long time, really, from in most people's cases, to be able to identify things by ear, by the way that they sound, by hearing, like, okay, well, that was a, you know, an augmented fifth, or that was a diminished fifth, or that was a major seventh versus a minor seventh, etc. But gradually you start building up kind of an internal language. You know, a way to recognize in your own head that you're hearing a certain interval or set of intervals, which then tells you that, okay, that's a particular mode or scale. Then you start hearing even bigger, and you start hearing chord progressions and going like, okay, well, that went from this chord, this type of chord, to this type of chord, so that must have been coming from, you know, the minor scale, or coming from the Phrygian mode, or whatever it happens to be. But that's what I'm doing. Like, one of the things people talk about on the channel here, especially when we do request nights, is like, you know, how are you figuring these things out by ear so quickly? I'm listening for like a clue. I'm listening for something to go like, okay, that went from, you know, the root note, because the root note's easy to find in most cases. That went from the root note and went up a half step and then down a whole step from the root. And I go, well, okay, there's only two modes that do that. So that's going to be either Phrygian or Locrian. And I start filling in around that with my ears. You know, when something goes. And I know that Locrian is less common, so it's more likely to be Phrygian. And so unless I hear, oh, I'm going to turn the delay off. So unless I specifically hear that sourness from that diminished fifth sticking out, I go, that's okay, that's almost certainly going to be a Phrygian sound. And that then tells me that the chord progression is likely to be, you know, a certain thing as well. Or, you know, why, like, in every stream pretty much I go, that's just the blues scale, because everything is just the blues scale. That, once you sort of learn to hear the sound and recognize the blues scale, it turns up everywhere. Or the blues scales, the major and minor blues scales. But no, it's a building process. You start with the building blocks. You start with just the intervals. Build the intervals into scales and simple chords. Build the scales into sequences of modes. Build those modes into sequences of chords and chord progressions. Build those chords into more complex chords. Build those more complex chords into chord progressions. And you just start stacking up piece by piece. Each time you're adding on a few little blocks, a few little intervals being added to what you already knew. And you're expanding your ears. You're expanding your ability to hear those things. But if you don't get to where you can hear the basics, where you can hear like, oh, that's a major six, you know, or that's a major second, whatever those particular fundamental intervals happen to be. If you can't really hear those and get to where you can recognize those somewhat consistently, it gets a lot harder when you start putting them in, you know, chords that are, or get into rootless chords where we don't even have the root note in them anymore. Fun stuff like that. Or then you can get super crazy into like polychords, which are not really that, not super easy to play on guitar compared to piano, you know, but where we have two different types of chords stacked onto each other. You're usually not going to hear those outside of like contemporary classical music and modern jazz, though. But you know, it is a thing that you can eventually learn to hear. You know, what if we take, let's say, a B triad, and then we put, or in this case, a C triad, and let's put an A major triad on top of it. You know, that could be heard as like a C major 13 add flat 9, something like that. But can also be heard as two separate chords, two separate types of triads stacked on top of one another. And eventually you learn to hear those just by learning small chunks, little pieces. You know, so go take your favorite song, or go take like any song that you hear, really. If it's a rock song, it's probably going to be on the simpler side. Depends on what you're into, but they tend to be harmonically a little more basic, you know, or country or something like that, something that's a little more on the popular end of things. And just sit down by ear one day and play a little chunk. That's what we do in here when we get requests, especially like things that are more challenging. Take a little chunk and just play that little chunk over and over and over and over and over. And you just start to find it, start to hear it. You go like, okay, well, that sounds minor to me. Well, what are my minor intervals? What are my minor scales, my minor modes? Okay. Until you start to find it a little bit. Then you play next little chunk. Okay, well, that added, you know, X, Y, or Z. And we work our way through it. I mean, it's going to take you longer at first. Just is. There's no way around that. But eventually, you've done it, after you've done it for several years, especially if you've really focused on doing that, you'll get to where you can do it, you know, pretty much the same way that I do, where we can sit here and figure it out usually within a few minutes. Now, you need to add that to your technical practice too, you know, to making sure you're working on your scales and chords and fingerings and your timing and your different picking techniques and all that kind of stuff. But this is the really useful thing about theory. You know, it's not just on paper. It is helping translate the things that you hear into sort of a common language and a comprehensible language, rather than just a purely internal language that's relative only to your own experience. And once you decide to get into like Indian classical music or something like that, then all this kind of goes out the window. Though we can still use this system, the Western musical system or the 12-tone system, to compare back. We can say, well, okay, this is halfway between, you know, a half step, something like that. We can get into quarter tones and microtones and all those kind of things, and we can use it as like a reference point, which is handy. But learning to hear it is a whole different story. Or to really internalize it. I think it's pretty crazy. As they tend to have many Asian musical systems have a lot more subdivisions of the octave than ours do. All right. Let's noodle some. Or, while noodling, any more questions? Or anything need more clarification? Why am I fingering this way? Hey, Keep, what's up, man? Where have you been? Oh, we've been doing great, man. The stream's been growing really well, really nicely. We discovered last stream that the auto mod censors the word flanger. But we've been talking about modes tonight. We talked about the major modes. Have a chart for it up in the Discord if you want it. Make sure to check in there and grab it. Where we went through all of the modes of the major scale, kind of what they are, how they work, how to construct them. Now I'm just kind of noodling, but I'm demonstrating ways, kind of subtly, in which we can make an adjustment. We can substitute one mode for another to kind of hear how the character changes, how the flavor sort of changes as we move from one. You know, so if we start off in Aeolian. Then we shift to Dorian. And then we shift to Phrygian. How those different colors come out. Little harmonic minor there. And something that I brought up earlier is that once we deviate or once we modify that major scale formula so that we're no longer playing a sequence of 2 holes and a half, 3 holes and a half, we actually get a whole other set of modes. The harmonic minor has its own set of modes. The melodic minor has its own set of modes. Or you can look at the jazz minor if we're going to look at the harmonic minor without the modifications on descending. You know, they all have their own modal sequences that come out of them. You know, so if we take harmonic minor, man, it sounds really grandiose with that reverb. Then we get a whole new set of modes and chords that come from them then. That one produces some of my favorite ones. That fourth mode, the fourth mode of the harmonic minor, the I guess you could call it like a Dorian sharp 4, gives us, and then the fifth, the Phrygian dominant, super Middle Eastern sounding. That's our scale that we use for songs like Caravan. And tons and tons and tons of metal songs. That it's kind of like a quick shortcut to sounding kind of world music-y. Then the seventh mode of that, the super Locrian, essentially super common as well. Or actually, super Locrian, the seventh mode of the melodic minor, which is almost the same, but really common in fusion and jazz. You can go from there into even crazier stuff like the Messiaen's modes of limited transposition and things. That's, you know, basically all just doing math. But at this point, basically, I'm just taking questions, chatting, playing kind of modal things. So if you got questions, ask away. Or just things you want to chat about. Yeah, alternate picking is kind of a good way to set up steady time and consistent kind of pick attack as you're trying to increase your speed. Now, when you're alternate picking, you have kind of a few different ways you can approach it. You know, let's say we're taking that sort of beginner exercise that I use. This is an exercise that I give to every student that's starting out, even some students that have been playing for a while, just to try to develop good technique. That's where we go. One, two, three, four, 1, 2, 3, 4, one finger per fret in a little group like that. Alternate picking is going to give us access to the most fluidity and the most speed, though speed is not necessarily like a goal. It's a thing that you need in order to be able to play some stuff. It's not a goal in and of itself, let's say. But alternate picking is going to let us move through that with the least amount of right hand effort, because every time we go down, we're in a position to go up and vice versa. So it lets us create kind of a continuous movement with our picking hand, while going all down requires us to pass through the string, stop the pick, come around the string, pass through it again. So there's always this kind of stop or tiny, tiny little pause to the downs. Doing all downs is worth practicing because some styles of music, that's kind of part of their sound. But you don't want it to be your default, because you can build up a lot more fluidity with a lot less effort in the right hand by alternating. You know, try to get the pick moving as small as you possibly can, hold the pick as close to the tip as you possibly can, and let it dig in as little as you possibly can. So my pick is basically just kind of hovering right over the top of the string. It's not going all the way down to the pick guard or to the top of the guitar. If you imagine the string being bisected by a line running through its diameter into a top half and a bottom half, the top half being up here, the bottom half being the half closest to the guitar, the pick mostly just kind of sits in that top half because that lets it move through very freely. We start to dig in, the pick starts to grab, it starts to hit the guitar, it starts to hit pickups, and it starts to hang and give us little hiccup sounds. Well, if we can keep it nice and light, we can move pretty quickly with minimal effort. Then you have to synchronize it with your left hand, which is a little bit of a different issue, but that's another good use for this exercise. But in some styles of music, like say gypsy jazz, they strictly alternate except when they change strings. Whenever they change strings, they start with a downstroke. So they'll be, you know, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up. Because the downstroke's a little more forceful sounding. That's sort of a convention. And some styles of music have conventions like that. Bluegrass does that quite a bit as well. Some players will strictly alternate no matter what. So they'll stay down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, no matter what sort of sequence or position the pick is at and how it's transitioning. I tend to use a little more economy style where, like, if the pick is going down towards the floor, I'll use a down. If the pick is using an up, I'll use an up, even if an up preceded it, which makes a sound that's a little bit smoother. You know, if we listen, like, say, down, up, 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 down, up. That's strict alternating. We wind up with this down, up, down, up, down, up, where we have to skip over the G string to get this up. I tend to do economy, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down. That's a little more natural for my hands. Other people prefer the strict alternating, though. That's more natural for their hands. It changes the sound very slightly, though. I don't know if that translates through the mic, but it does change the sound in a way that you can notice. The economy tends to give you a little more smoothness in string transition, which since I play a lot of kind of jazzier sort of stuff and legato kind of stuff, the economy suits that very well. A lot of the shredder guys, though, tend to be in the strict alternating camp. Sweeping is for styling or feeling. Explain what you mean by that a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, you should practice different types of picking. You should work on all of them really to be as well rounded as you can. But you'll tend to find there's one that you'll find yourself sort of inclined towards, or that feels better to your hands and works better for you. As I said, I tend to use the sort of economy style tends to work better for me. Other people like absolutely strict alternating. No, sweep picking is just a technique, man. It's like any other technique. There's not an advantage or disadvantage to it. There are times in which sweep picking is appropriate to use, and other times in which it doesn't really fit at all. Sometimes it's fun to use it in places where it doesn't really fit at all. All sweep picking is, though, is like an extreme form of economy picking. So it's taking generally arpeggios. It's taking a chordal arpeggio, so something like this. Let's say like a little G major arpeggio like that. Instead of articulating, it's using the hand all in kind of one continuous motion. As we go towards the floor, we use all downstrokes. We come towards the ceiling. We use upstrokes. And it creates this kind of continuum where it sounds like we're moving very, very quickly from one region of the neck or one pitch range to another pitch range super fluidly. It can be useful to transition you from one point of the neck to another, to move from way down low to way up high very, very quickly. As we move through these kind of extended arpeggios. But it's not, right or wrong or good or bad in any particular way. Guitarists get kind of obsessed with it because guitarists tend to think too kind of athletically about guitar in some cases, especially like hard rock and metal guitarists. They tend to fetishize being like super, super, super technically able, or being able to play everything the fastest as they possibly can. And sweep picking is very, very flashy and very, very fast sounding. But if, that's your end goal is just to be as flashy and fast as possible, you're probably not going to be making very interesting music or very musical music. Use it when it's called for, when it's the right time to use it, when it creates the effect that you want, rather than using it just to be able to say, look at me, I can do it. That's a very difficult thing to get over too, especially if you're relatively new to guitar. You get on YouTube or wherever and you'll watch a million people just like shred faces off, and it seems like it's absolutely impossible, and you'll have a whole bunch of people in the comments arguing about how so and so is better and they can out shred whatever other guitarists. None of that really matters. Learn as many techniques as you can and become as competent and capable as you can, so you can play the music that you want to play how you want to play it. But don't sit there and go, oh, well, Paul Gilbert can play this thing, 200 BPM faster than I can. I guess I should just give up. Or, I'm not a good guitarist because I can't do this thing. You can do pretty much anything if you practice it enough, for one. Almost anybody. I've had students that I would have considered for many years to be incredibly talentless, who put in a great deal of effort and became actually pretty good guitar players, pretty good musicians. Because they worked and worked and worked and worked and worked through the sounding awful. for in some cases literally years before one day it like clicked and all of a sudden their hands worked and their ears could hear the stuff. What about Steve Villa? Is that Bob Villa's guitar playing brother? Is he like Will Smith? He's Steve Vai with tiny features. I like some Vai. I've seen him live. He puts on a good live show, but it is definitely over the top. As far as music goes, I like the stuff he did with David Lee Roth Band the best, probably. Solo stuff is really hit or miss. I like some songs. I don't like other songs. But he, like a lot of other shredders, relating back to the theme of the stream, is super modal. He tends to pick a mode and like find a melody, work a melody out of that mode, and then really kind of milk it, play little variations of it, different takes on that melody. So, you have this is implying like a very heavily sort of Aeolian sound. He's avoiding the 6 specifically in this case to give him a little bit more flexibility when he starts to improvise on top of it, though. The harmony underneath gets pretty interesting, though. The harmony underneath actually starts off turning Phrygian, which is pretty cool. So, like, we have... I think you might leave the G open. Yeah, man, he don't even need a case. Carry that guitar all on his own. So he starts off, you're thinking like, okay, this is Aeolian, then the chord changes, and suddenly you go, oh no, wait, it's Phrygian. And then it's back to Aeolian. But it's super modal, and a lot of his compositions are. He picks a mode and then he really works it. He develops a melody out of the mode and then he evolves it. He changes it up a little bit every time and then starts to solo over it, usually kind of working in and around that and then making little modifications as he goes on. And a lot of people write that way. A lot of metal bands write that way. They'll write riffs that way. They'll start off with, let's get us a distorted sound here. So you say, okay, I'm going to take my E pedal tone because this is like the most common metal cliche ever. And I'm just going to bounce back and forth between, say, like a scale tone and this low E. Just gonna... I need to turn my post gain up a little. There we go. So I'm going to say, like, I want an Aeolian sound. Well, Aeolian mode. Or if I want a Phrygian sound. Any particular mode I can use, and I can start to just take power chords in the case of a lot of metal bands and just move them up and down the mode or find them inside of the mode and transition between them. So I'll be using Locrian. And suddenly I have a riff. And I can evolve from there. Really, 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 really common. Then you can say, well, okay, instead of doing power chords, what if I took the thirds? So if I have an Aeolian riff, and I could say like, and you start adding in your chromaticism and all your stuff from there. But it gives you themes and it gives you ideas really, really easily in a really simple way. Now, true intellectual musicians write music based around the 1-4-5 progression while aware that the 1-4-5 progression is actually just a 2-5-1 progression. These pickups have an interesting effect with this much gain. I don't usually play this guitar super distorted. You know, but you can create like a very process-driven form of writing like that, to create riffs and then to hear riffs as well. You know, but that's one of the reasons why it's usually not terribly difficult to figure out a lot of the stuff we do on Metal Monday, is it tends to use a similar sort of process. And so I can sort of hear like, okay, well, there's this Phrygian tone, there's a, you know, whatever. And they've just moved it up to, you know, a different key in some cases. Or it's just from the blues scale. Yeah, go back to my clean tone. I like this guitar much better clean. But I wasn't joking about 1-4-5 being a 2-5-1. The 4 chord is actually just a first inversion of the 2 chord. Little plagal cadence there. No, you have to like classical too because of Randy Rhoads. Yeah, man, I got into classical guitar. I heard Randy Rhoads play D, so I learned that piece. And now I'm just like, I'm a classical guitarist, bro. Well, you know, I was really into metal, but when I went to go to music school, they didn't offer like, you know, electric guitar classes, you know, unless I wanted to take jazz or something like that. But jazz is just a bunch of wrong notes. And I know that like Randy Rhoads and Yngwie Malmsteen are both great classical guitarists, so I thought I'll learn to play classical guitar, bro. That's a bit of a music school cliche. Yngwie is another one who's super, super, super modal as well. You know, his playing tends to be really monophonic, and he likes the harmonic minor and its modes in particular, and we'll just milk them, you know, for extended phrases, long periods of time. He has a really, really great technical control. You know, he can play pretty much any type of technique you can imagine. But his harmonic thinking tends to be very modal and kind of linear. And that's sort of almost the definition of sort of the neoclassical rock guitar sound. Well, it's like very reductive classical guitar music. Being able to do, you know, some of the things, like if you were to attempt to apply some of the internal harmony and contrapuntal stuff that someone like Bach did in the context of a rock band, it would usually just turn into a mess. It'd be very, very difficult to do, especially like a hard rock band where you have lots of distorted instruments. So it's kind of reduced to the more aggressive melodic parts with simpler harmony underneath. No, intellectual is only like K-pop. I mean, K-pop is like purely conceptual. You know, all those K-pop idols like aren't even allowed to exist as human beings. What are the dogs barking at? Yeah, Maru, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for asking questions. Always happy to answer questions. Like a dog command. If I could get it to just make a, have you make an emote of the dog. Yeah, use an ASCII converter to take an actual picture of her. Modern music. Oh, I think there's tons and tons and tons of great modern music. It's just largely moved away from radio spaces. You know, a lot of the function of what you hear on the radio and the homogeneity of what you hear on the radio is a product of, technological advances in digital recording, in particular things like Pro Tools, which have made it really, really easy to kind of consistently reproduce certain kinds of sounds. So once they discovered things that were commercially viable, it became incredibly easy to just kind of crank them out infinitely with minimal investment. At the same time, that progress has also allowed a lot of people who wouldn't traditionally have had access to recording to record their music and release it on their own. So the huge explosion in DIY stuff, indie and underground stuff in pretty much every genre has been facilitated by those same technological advances. Yeah, it's difficult to get away from. I think there are probably broader cultural forces at work, especially in the 90s coming out of the sort of hair metal era. And moving into the kind of Gen X era with the grunge music and alt rock, there was kind of a social value on differentiation. And so for a period, we have a lot of bands that would be kind of outsider-ish with unusual characters and more dissonant and unusual sorts of sounds that were actually commercially viable for quite a while. But and then those sort of distilled into what Alec calls post-grunge, this kind of like bland corporate hard rock variation that spawns bands like Nickelback and stuff like that down the road. And that kind of became the driving force of the 90s. Or the 2000s, I mean. At least in the rock arena. Yeah, I mean, it's been hugely important. I mean, you can get online and you can find anybody doing anything you can imagine, which is amazing. Prior to that, you more or less had to like seek out specialty record labels, people that dealt in, like 4-track tape recordings and stuff like that, or you had to actively be involved in a particular scene somehow, either knowing somebody or being in the right place, the right city at the right time to encounter certain types of things. Yeah, but Keep, you have anti-taste. You like really good things and really bad things because you like basically everything. Well, I mean that's right. That's an argument that probably doesn't really hold up because there will be songs I'm sure that will be remembered by people who were teenagers when those songs came out. Or people maybe not necessarily teenagers, but people for whom those songs were formative musical experiences. I'm sure there are tons of songs that I remember from the '90s when I was a kid, when I was first really allowed to listen to rock music and stuff because I wasn't when I was really little because it was the devil. But tons of obscure alt rock and grunge songs and stuff like that I remember that nobody else seems to. So. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're good. Some of them are terrible. The easiest thing, though, about remembering a contemporary radio pop is that they're all the same song over and over and over again. Same chord progressions, same effects. And I actually blame most of that on Nashville. Because Nashville really worked out how to reduce a song to a formula and reproduce it. Probably before anyone else. Standing the test of time is probably too nebulous a condition anyway. Should just change the title of this thread to Pontification. If I'm using up all the space vibes now, though, what am I going to do Wednesday? Well, last Wednesday we broke out some of the Moogs. I think we got out the MIDI Murph and the Phaser. Still can get out the Freak Box, though the Freak Box is a real weirdo. and the cluster flux, which the cluster flux is amazing. Plus the mini Moogs, I have the boost and the drive and the delay. Yeah, I had the mini Murph out front and then the phaser in the loop. I wish I could get the control processor. But all the Moog stuff has gone crazy since they discontinued the Moografogers. You know, the control processor is essentially just like a set of CV outs with various parameters, so you can send different waveforms to any parameter on the pedal. Because pretty much almost everything on them, almost every control on the large Moogs has CV in and out. So you can control it by envelope, LFO, all kinds of other stuff. You can reroute the pedals into each other. You know, but those went from being like $200-250 used to being like $400 and $500. Yeah, there's a great local punk band you should check out called the Burger Queens. I think they're kind of on a hiatus right now because, you know, their shows got canceled because of the quarantine. But they're definitely worth listening to if you like kind of like nasty hardcore punk. No, they don't suck. I've seen them live like 3 or 4 times at least. I mean, they're kind of sloppy, but you're supposed to be. It's punk. I've even got some of their t-shirts somewhere around here. Can't wear them though because they didn't have any tall sizes. My mom wears them of all people. I gave a couple to her. There's a band called All the Saints. I don't know if they're still around. They were pretty good though. Kind of a stonery, not exactly metal, but kind of a stoner rock sort of band almost. Nah, it's all fat dudes. Well, fat-ish dudes. Well, one's less fat than he used to be. But he probably still thinks he's fat. Heck yeah, dude. We've probably only got a few minutes left anyway. Because we're coming up on 2:42. Usually wrap it up around 3. But I'll jump over and maybe we can raid you here in a few minutes once you get going. If I can figure out how. I don't know how to do it. because we've never rated anybody before. Good old royalty-free music. It's an interesting field. There used to be a really cool kind of like punk ska like band. So they weren't exactly a ska band, but they definitely had like ska influences. A little bit of oi punk called the Bastard Sons, S-U-N-S, but I think they moved to Florida. They're really fun. Oh, is that all? That's all there is to it? Yeah, Rusty, we'll jump over there in a minute. I like to keep the streams at about 3 hours. Though we went really long the other night. I think we got a little over 4 on Friday or something. a second. All right, so that was pretty heavily modal. I started with the minor modes. He worked through most of those and then shifted to the major modes, mostly Ionian. In that case, a little bit of Lydian, a little bit of mixed Lydian here and there. That's the kind of stuff we'll be doing a lot on Wednesday. This coming Wednesday is Washed Out Wednesday, where we play around with pedals and make ambient compositions and do all kinds of fun stuff like that. Spacey and droney, and sometimes just plain weird and noisy. But it's a lot of fun. But all kind of improvised in that case. But again, we had a full lesson on the major modes earlier today. The chart for that lesson that shows the modes, the info about them is in the Discord. So if you're not in the Discord, get in the Discord. You can download the charts for the lessons type stuff we do on there, and just chat and talk in general about guitar and music related stuff all week long. Make sure you hit the follow button if you haven't hit the follow button already, so you can know when I'm live, which is usually Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights, doing various guitar and music related stuff. Thanks everybody for watching. We're going to go raid somebody now. We're going to go raid Rusty. So hop over to Rusty, give him a follow. Musician Brian Bayless. Awesome. Thanks for hitting that follow button, man. Check the schedule down below. This week we've got Washed Out Wednesday for ambient music, and we've got Friday Night Jazz this week, I believe. Though we might do Friday Night Funk this week. I might play bass this week, because I feel like playing bass lately. But thanks for that follow. Thanks for hanging out. Hope you liked what you heard. But we've been going for 3 hours now. I'm sweaty. I'm hungry. Let's go raid Rusty. Let's see if there's an easy way to do it. Go drop Rusty a follow. Rusty's building stuff with his 3D printer and playing video games at the same time. All right, type raid Rusty _ builds. All right, let's see if it works. Yeah, no problem, Keep. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for hanging out. All right, get ready. Let's go raid. Go give him a follow. Go say what's up, Rusty. Let's do it.
Trucks or your own buses passing by, they'll actually flash at you. It's the funniest thing. Oh geez, what is going on there? Is this a oh geez, is this a raid? Oh, this is the highest stuff. Oh wow. Yeah, this is the highest view count I've ever had so far. Oh wait, pull up. Funny guys. Yeah. Here, I'll do a oh wait, that's not a handbrake, it's a parking brake. Oh Jesus Christ, I just crashed into a cop. I guess I just crashed into a cop in honor of being you feel intimidated. Here, let's see, can I someone needs to play some initial D music. Oh jeez. Alright, we can do this. You got this. Alright, come on, get back in. Come on. Please. Alright, this is not liking me. Are we stuck in reverse? I think we were stuck in reverse for a second. Alright, we're good. Alright, so I think we're ready to start an actual drive here. Start it.